To discuss the anti-discrimination ordinance. The borough we do not have a draft of an ordinance yet, but we have had several drafts from other ordinances, from other communities to take a look at. And this is an opportunity for council to discuss the various aspects of the different ordinances, and if council is so moved, to charge our solicitor to draft an ordinance for Newtown. Does anyone wish to be heard?
I thought we pretty much covered it at the work session. I voiced my support for moving forward to the next step. I think it speaks to the kind of town we want it to be. I know we discussed having potentially the Doylestown as a good example of what a good one of these ordinances looks like, and that was the recommendation, I believe, from the borough group.
From the, well, actually, it was Equality PA,
Yeah.
and from the other representatives from the other boroughs that have passed them, yeah.
I'm
And,
ready to move to the next step and have the debate. We'll hear, I'm sure we'll have multiple sides of the story.
Okay.
Well, I had asked for a little more time to read through some of the materials. And, I concur with Gerard's observation. It's an important ordinance for the borough to consider. My concern is, prior to last Wednesday, this wasn't on council's agenda in any way, shape, or form that I was aware of. And in reading through the ordinance from Bethlehem, I think, yeah, and then this morning getting the document from the Metro Task Force, I kind of sat back and said, well, this has broader implications than I'm prepared to wrestle with at this point in time. And then as we left last Wednesday, one of the business owners asked for what the impact might be on the business community. And we spent an hour last week listening to the business community to try and find out what their concerns were and issues were. And I think my sense is that we're rushing to get this done. I don't understand why, because it is so important. And it has an impact on all of the aspects of the borough. And as a single councilman sitting up here, I don't feel that I have enough sense of community to really make a determination as to how everyone might feel about it. We've spent $30,000 doing an Old Skunky study to determine the impact of water in Old Skunky. We spent well over a year having our planning commission develop our comprehensive plan. We spent another year working on a TND ordinance. And my sentiment at the moment is I think we need to give this ordinance its due. And my recommendation would be for a committee to be formed inside the borough to discuss the concerns that citizens might have with respect to this ordinance before we actually sit down and write the ordinance. I don't know enough about it myself to say yea or nay tonight. And my recommendation tonight would be let's spend some time between now and the end of the year, collect the input just as we've collected input on every major event that's going on in the borough. And I think this is a major event for the borough, and I don't want to see it short-shifted. That would be my recommendation to council. Thank you.
Without repeating what I said on Wednesday, I wholeheartedly support the adoption of the Civil Rights Ordinance, and I support the ordinance both in concept and largely in the language of the Doylestown Borough Ordinance that we reviewed. I haven't read yet the New Hope Ordinance that was forwarded to us this morning. I'll take a look at that as well. And if it is correct that there are 17 municipalities in Pennsylvania that have adopted a similar ordinance, 22. Even if it's 22, then even being the 23rd puts us in a leadership position in promoting the cause of civil rights in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And I view that as a good thing, as a positive thing, and as an opportunity for this borough and its council to step up and take a leadership role in Pennsylvania. And look forward to moving on to the next step.
Yes, it's my turn. I think Gerard and Perry just now articulated pretty well my feelings on it. I wanted to take a moment and just address the concerns Bob expressed. I think the issues we're talking about here in terms of and the gravity of them, of an anti-discrimination ordinance, are a little tough to compare to the two examples you cited. The passage of an ordinance, especially an ordinance of this type, is strictly a creature of council's making. We can choose to do it, or we can say we don't want to do it. But we're the only ones who can do it. And I think it's incumbent upon us to look carefully at the materials we've been provided, to think about the issues, particularly ones of a constitutional nature, which are raised, and then decide to go forward. But I think the real discussion takes place when the decision to go forward occurs, and if tonight we authorize a solicitor to draft an ordinance, that's when the real discussion takes place, I think, that you've expressed concern about. But until we get beyond this particular step, to get an ordinance in a draft form, it's a little tough to talk about exactly what it is and what its effect would be. So I think we're talking concept, we're talking philosophy, but we're also not reinventing the wheel here. There are a number of very, very good examples out there that we can draw upon. And as Julia said a couple minutes ago, it's not something that we're literally breaking ground on. This is something which has reached a level of concern and philosophy within the association itself, to a point that there's a resolution that was passed at the last meeting to try and make this happen on the state level. So I think we are taking a leadership position, but in order to really have the discussion you're talking about, we need an actual ordinance to talk about. And I happen to subscribe to Gerard's view that, and what was said at work session, that the Doylestown example, the template, appears to be the best one to work with. And Bob, the good news is it's also cheap because it's already been enacted somewhere else. Economical.
Nothing cheap about it.
So that's good. That's good. I think we have some things to draw upon, not to take away from our solicitor, but we're able then to take somewhat of a proven example and work with it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. I guess during the work session, having had this presented to me for the first time, I really didn't have a reaction to it. I mean, I'm a firm believer, and I try to live my life as treat people the way they should be treated. I don't need a document to tell me. However, I do understand why you would have certain ordinances or documents in place to protect people. Someone had mentioned Wednesday about grassroots, and I totally believe in that, and I feel that that's probably the best way to kind of get opinions and public opinion swayed. But I think in this particular case, it's been 4 days since I've had an opportunity to read this. I see some of the neighbors have come out to talk about it, which is great, but I really would prefer to have a lot more input from my community before I decided to go either way. Now, does the ordinance adopted or put together, rather, start to generate that discussion a little more? Possibly, but I feel, not including the weekend, I've had 4 days to look at the two ordinances, one that I think we received last night. So I'm a little hesitant to kind of jump forward here. I do agree. I do like the dialogue. I would like to see the interaction between the community and get other people's points of view rather than just my own. So I would like to just maybe digest that further, and my recommendation would be, let's take a look at this New Hope ordinance. Let's look at the Doylestown one, which we had. Let's get out, talk to some of the people in our community, and just get a better understanding of where they're at, and then maybe build from there, build a consensus that we all can be happy with, and not kind of go through it, have it out, and then maybe have people bicker rather than discuss.
Well, as you all know, we've participated in passing ordinances, some which have taken years, literally, like the sidewalk ordinance that we're going to address later on tonight, some which has taken months and have gone back and forth to the drawing board, being the noise ordinance, the event ordinance, things that we have, there are a number of ordinances that we have on our books that haven't been looked at in a long time and that we know we have to go back and bring up to date and so on, that by asking our solicitor to draft an ordinance is just the first step. It gives us all the same thing to look at. So if you go back and look, and I know that I probably read these ordinances more than any of you have because I've been the one who's been thinking about this for the longest and gathering the most information and networking with other municipalities and trying to find out what were the issues that they dealt with and what is the most current language, which is the Doylestown one, and probably a little bit of Bethlehem because that was passed even more recently. But I know that I have a little bit more knowledge about this than the rest of council, and I appreciate that. But if we're going to have a real discussion about what the ordinance says and how Newtown Borough is going to organize this ordinance in terms of you have to set up a human relations commission, how does our borough do that? Which is distinctly different than, say, the way Doylestown does it, or the way Bethlehem, which is a city, does it. They have different governmental structures. We do different things, like we don't appoint chairs of our commissions, for example, and other boroughs do. So there are ways that the ordinance needs to be personalized for us. But I think the only way we can have a really good discussion, and I appreciate and want to bring the community out, I think this is like a first step. I mean, we have a nice little audience here, but I would like to see more people come out and express their views as we go along. but is to say, okay, well, this is what we're starting with, and let's all look at the same thing and say, okay, do we like the ordinance the way this particular draft is written? Are there things we need to tweak? Is there wording from a different ordinance that we prefer? But we still have to come back to something to start with. And so that's why am proposing that we ask our solicitor to come out to give us something to start with. And as you know, even if what he brings back next month is perfect, that we can't pass it next month anyway. You know, there's a whole process of advertising and all the rest, and that is all to enable us to hear what is out there. So I don't think it's rushing anything. I think it's just bringing clarity to an issue and allowing us to have something that we can start from, talk about, find out from the community how the community feels, and go forward.
How long have you been looking at this?
I've been thinking about it for a year. It was
So
raised.
why, with all due respect, Julia, if you've been energized to advance this forward over the last 12 months, to John's point, we've had 5 days to really reflect on this, and I'm sure you've done a fine job in terms of advancing the agenda under your control. And you're now asking us to vote on something that I don't feel we've had sufficient enough time to evaluate, as you have done over the last 12 months. And I think, as I did last week, I asked for a little more time to even look at this, and John's saying the same thing. We haven't had time to get reaction from the community, our constituents. You perhaps have, I don't know.
Well,
and again, you're creating a sense of urgency here tonight that I don't understand. And if you want to make a motion to vote, I'm going to vote. I can't vote either way.
Well,
I can't vote thumbs up or thumbs down. I'm going to vote
well,
present, and that's as far as I can go,
Yeah.
because you have had the advantage of 12 months worth of evaluation, consideration, thoughtful consideration. I don't know if you've had other discussions with other members of council, but they're all coming out in favor of this with the same amount of time we've had to reflect upon it. And I'm just saying, I think we're rushing to get something done, and I don't think it's fair to all members of council. My other four constituents feel differently about it. If you want to bring it to a vote, bring it to a vote. But I'm just telling you, I don't think it's the right thing for you to do, having spent 12 months evaluating this.
Let me just say that my awareness of the issue was brought to fore about a year ago. And I also brought it to council because I found out about it around the time of a local Bucks County Boroughs Association dinner. And when the topic had been brought up, I mentioned it to council. It's been brought to my attention by people within and without the borough over the last year or so. So I only started doing my research a few weeks back, and to say that, well, this, as I looked and saw more and more boroughs were looking at this and acting on this, that it seemed appropriate for me to look into it and to bring it to council. So that's why I bring it to you now. I know you haven't had much time to read through the legal jargon and so on. I can't say that I understand all of the legal ins and outs. I've talked to people who do. I've tried to get a feel for why this ordinance, not that ordinance. I have done some of that research. But from my point of view, just even starting to talking about passing the ordinance to me is very important. That we need to, I personally feel, that the borough is a place that is accepting and feels that everyone should have equal rights, and that this is one way for the borough to come forward and say, yes, this is true. We are a welcoming community. Please, come, live here, work here, shop here, and to everyone. And if you look at the beginnings of all of those ordinances, the first page is pretty much the same. New Hope's is a little older, so its language is different. But if you look at the one from Doylestown, even though the one from Bethlehem treats it a little bit differently, the first page is basically the same. It's all saying the same thing, and then there are slightly different ways of completing the ordinance. But it's important to me, and I hope it's important to the rest of council, that we talk about it. And the only way to have a good conversation is to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. And the only way to make sure we're talking about the same thing is to have a draft of an ordinance in front of us. It doesn't say we're passing this one. It doesn't say we're passing a different one. It just says that we're all starting at the same place, we're looking at the same pieces of paper, and we're discussing the same thing. And that's the only reason that I think the next step is just to ask for a draft ordinance that is tailored to Newtown, and let's work on that.